I'm Dan Small, and it's time once again for Outdoor Wisconsin.
Summer to fall, winter to spring, from Green Bay to where the St. Croix sings, from Kettle Moraine to Superior Shore, outdoor Wisconsin, outdoor Wisconsin.
Small-scale food production is growing in popularity here in Wisconsin and across the country, in rural and residential areas alike. One activity you can get into is backyard beekeeping. Debby Wolniak joined Charles Charby Kanan at the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee to learn more about this fascinating and tasty hobby.
We're here at the Urban Ecology Center, and I'm telling you, Charby, this is amazing. I love this bee pod behind us. What's happening right now?
So today we're here for a really kind of an unusual moment where the drone bees, or the male bees inside of the hive, are being kicked out for the winter.
Oh, really? What is their job during the summer?
So drone bees don't do anything in the hive as far as work. The worker bees do that, and they constitute about 95% of the hive. But 5% of the hive are the male bees, which are called drone bees. And when they work, their job is just to reproduce. So they stay in the hive and don't produce any construction. They don't have the mouths and the pieces to be able to do hive building or storage or anything like that. They just fly off to mate. So in the wintertime, there's no mating going on. So those are not necessary. So this is a bad time for beekeepers because they watch 5% of their hive get kicked out in the next couple of days.
How did you get started in this? I mean, this is really an interesting piece. You've been doing this for a couple of years, right?
Yeah. I've been doing beekeeping for about 7 years. And I learned from my partner Jesse, and we learned at Growing Power at one of their presentations. And then we started teaching together at Growing Power, and then later we started to think about developing this kind of a hive and taking it off onto our own to make a new company. So Jesse and I started looking at ways to be able to spread the hive out horizontally instead of vertically. We actually made about 4 or 5 different iterations or changes on the fly to be able to help people, as well as putting together a training curriculum that not only teaches people how to be beekeepers, but teaches places like the Urban Ecology Center to have all of their educators to be able to use the bee pod to be able to present to the public what's going on with bees.
This is really a great family activity, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful.
How would one get started? They would have the bee pod, they would bring the bees in, but really, what's the next step? How much time does it take?
It doesn't take much time. The first thing that's got to happen is you got to get the education. In the city of Milwaukee, they've made it legal for keeping bees, but you have to have certification, or you have to have proof that you know what you're doing.
Well, how do the bees get into the pod? How do they get started? I mean, you got an empty pod, let's say you just bring it out. How do you get them started in there?
Everybody asks that question. It's not if you build it, they will come. You actually order the bees in December, and they arrive in April or May in a package or a box. And what you do is you just open up the box, open up the hive just a little bit, and dump the box of bees in. And the queen comes in a special little cage. And you put the special cage in separately, and the bees will release her. All you've got to do is to put a little marshmallow or a little piece of candy where her door was, and they eat their way to meet each other. And in that process, they become friends. And then she rules the rest of the hive from that point on.
So you have your bee pod, now you have your bees, and what is the best thing to do to manage them?
Every 2 weeks you've got to go through the hive to see if the hive is looking to swarm or making a new queen. Now they do that for 4 reasons. They'll either do it because the hive is full, and so they've successfully completed filling a hive up and they need to make a new organism, a new beehive, and send it on its way, and so that's called a swarm. And the other reason would be that the hive is in a bad location, so it's not liking where it is. Too wet, too cold, too something. Sometimes bees, when they're inside of trees, the limb, because it's rotted, will break off, and the hive will have to leave because now the ventilation is all wrong. So that's the second reason. The third reason is that the queen that they have is either old or is not producing properly. And so if she's not doing a good job, the hive will actually make a decision to move on.
Wow.
And the fourth reason is that the queen is killed. Most people don't know it, but the honeybee that we see today is not native to North America.
Really?
It was brought here by the settlers in the 1400s because they knew how important it was to ensure that the plants they put in the ground produced crops. The pollination that bees do has been so important that it was written early on in our rules and in our laws of the United States of America that the postal system is required to carry bees because it's that important. Not the honey the pollination. The big thing now is that cities across the United States are seeing that it's important because we've got a collapse in the bee populations worldwide. And the bees are vitally important to the way we live. Every third bite of food that we eat comes from the bees, comes from something that bees pollinated. Whether it's the food that we feed the animals that we eat later on, or whether it's the food that we eat directly. So that's important. And if these bees keep going in the way they're going, there's not going to be food around, and we're going to have a very, very different world. So what we're looking at doing is trying to decentralize beekeeping. Change it back the way it was a long time ago. 150 years ago, they didn't truck them around from place to place. Everybody had one in the farm. Everyone had it in their backyard.
Yeah.
We want to get back to that.
Last